Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is week 5. We've already have football going on right now. We got bye weeks are upon us. We've got a laundry list of injuries. I couldn't think of anyone better to help me out this morning, sort this out, than the professor himself, Professor IDP. Scott, how are we doing this morning?
Doing great. Happy to be back with you 2 weeks in a row. I had so much fun last time that they couldn't keep me away.
Perfect. We'll see if we can make it a trifecta next week, huh?
Yeah.
So, Scott, before we get started today, I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit. If I'm 1-3, 0-4 right now, is it time for me to push the panic button and start looking for next year, or do I still have time to rectify my season?
Yeah, so I've had a lot of slow starts in redraft leagues in particular that have ended up righting the ship. So I'm very much a if I'm going to sell, I sell at the trade deadline kind of guy. Unless I'm getting cold calls for somebody or something like that, I'm very much a buy and hold person until I know that I'm just totally out, because maybe you're 0-4 because you got hit really bad by the injury bug. Well, the first place team can get hit really bad by the injury bug too and go on a 4-game skid. So I'm always as much as I can. I shouldn't say always. I'm not putting myself up for sainthood here, but I try to be a very patient fantasy player. And 0-4, 1-4, 1-5. I've got a lot of leagues that do double headers, so I've got a couple of real ugly records right now out there. But I'm someone who likes to keep going as long as I can, because the trade value is still going to be there. One of the things that I've noticed people don't really adjust for is if it's a half season rental versus a 3/4 season rental. If we're talking about like an old IDP like Bobby Wagner, his value isn't going to drop from a third to a fourth if it's a half season rental versus a 3/4. If you're the buyer, they're still going to want the third halfway through. And if you're the seller, you're not going to get more for him really now than you would 3-4 weeks from now. So I like to see where I'm at mid-season, as close to I can before those trade deadlines in leagues, before really committing to one path or another.
And some of those values, those assets might be even worth more right before the trade deadline. If you're out and you kind of almost get into a bidding war between a couple of teams that are, vying for that last playoff spot, trying to make their roster the best that it can be heading into the playoffs. So, yeah, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't on an island there about holding out hope that you can right the ship. So,
yeah. And I'm the same in other ways too. If I'm in a league where I'm doing really, really well, I'm not making a bunch of trades right now to shore up my team, because again, it can go sideways. If looks like I'm making a playoff push around the trade deadline, and I know some people are trying to sell because maybe you have leagues that do draft order based on potential points, or we have one league where we do draft order based on the points on your roster for your top 26 players or something like that. So there are going to be people who are incentivized to sell, and you can always buy. So I don't like to do too much trading, too much movement here in the first really half of the season until I get a better sense of who's a buyer, who's a seller, which I am, and let things go from there.
I think that's some pretty sound advice. So we got some questions starting to stream in here a little bit, and we'll get started. Our goal this week, Scott, I get sometimes a little long-winded in some of our answers, so we're going to try to be a little more time sensitive to some of our questions that are coming in. So we're going to try to do the best we can. Only Jack in the Village had a question for us this morning. He has big 3 scoring-ish with kick return and punt return yards. He needed to start 2 of these between Paulson Adebo, Quinton Lake, and Keyshawn Nixon.
I feel like we had the revenge of Keyshawn Nixon last week.
We did.
It's cut him, get rid of him, let's go all in on Lake. And then they both had good games, so you didn't screw yourself if you drop Nixon for Lake. And I have them both in the Madness League, and they scored within 2 points of each other. So I was happy with both. But I don't know, you're much more tuned into the Packers. Was that a change for Nixon, or was that a one-time blip, you think?
Well, with Jair Alexander out last week, Nixon saw the most snaps he saw last season. Usually he was hovering right around 80% snaps, and last week he was at 97% of snaps. So I think that was very much tied to Jair Alexander not playing. He started the week with did not practice, but he's had limited practices the last few days. So if Alexander is good to go this week versus the Rams, and the hard part about this one is it's a late start. It's a Sunday game versus the Rams, so we won't know that. So I'm actually going to lean towards Adebo and Lake here just because of the unknown with Nixon. I hate chasing last week's points if I can avoid it. And then there, like, and the if game, like if Alexander is out, if the Rams offense can put up, I don't like doing that in my lineups where I know what I'm getting with Adebo. That's going to be a great matchup for him on Monday night versus the Chiefs. If you ever listened to the show, my love for Lake. So he's going to be in there every week for me too. So it really comes down between Adebo and Nixon for me. And with Nixon having a bounce back game, like we were almost cutting him last week, and then he rectified his week with the big 97% snap share last week with Alexander out. So it's Adebo and Lake for me. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that, Scott.
No, I'm fine with that too. This is one of those good situations where it's a nice tight grouping of players, and I think Nixon might have a little bit more of a ceiling, especially if he is back in that normal primary slot role and has the blitz upside. He obviously has the return upside if he gets the chance to do it. So I think Lake is definitely the safest of the three. Adebo is probably the second safest, and I think Nixon is a good upside swing. But if I playing a game of significant importance, I'd probably pick Adebo and Lake as well.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Jack, for the question. Good friend of the show. Moving on to JJ. He's got Jared Verse against Green Bay going up against Zach Tom. Or Kayvon Thibodeau going up against that Seattle offensive line. So let's take that defensive line question first. So, Scott, I'm going to let you take this one since this is your area of expertise here.
Yeah, I've got Thibodeau as a really nice play. Seattle has been somewhat stingy to opposing defensive ends, only allowing 19.9 points per game so far this season, according to a no position left behind scoring that I like to use for my home leagues. But, he played 82% of snaps last week. Verse was at 68% of snaps last week. So I think that is why I have them in just different tiers. They're really separated. I'm looking at my list here, separated by 3 names in between. So I don't think it's a huge drop off, but Green Bay is a better matchup for edges, but still not an ideal matchup by any stretch of the imagination. So, Versus grades are a little bit better. His matchup's a little bit better. But that 20% almost difference in snap share last week is enough to scare me off of Verse and push me towards Thibodeau this week.
Yeah, and Green Bay's offensive line is pretty highly ranked, I think, aren't they? They're a pretty good offensive unit. So, moving on to the linebacker question here, we got Roquan McMillan or the Patriots versus Miami, or McDuffie versus the Rams. We've kind of seen McDuffie's snaps kind of like start to tick down here a little bit. I know that he started off the season really hot, playing 97% of snaps. Then it was 89% of snaps, 78% of snaps, 76% of snaps last week. So we're starting to see this trend. And as a result of that, we're seeing a little more Edgerrin Cooper. We're seeing a little more Eric Wilson in the lineup each week. So that has me a little bit nervous. I do like the Rams rushing attack. I think they're going to run the ball a lot. I just don't know what McMillan's outlook looks like versus Miami's. That offense has looked putrid the last couple of weeks. So
they're getting OBJ back this week. So maybe that's going to fix everything for them.
So that's the key to the whole offense right there. So I'm actually probably going to lean McMillan just because of the snap percentage going the opposite direction I want to see McDuffie's going in right now. I know with the injury that the Patriots suffered to Tavai, was it? No, the other Juwan Bentley.
Oh yeah.
So Juwan Bentley just kind of had that, and we've seen McMillan snaps going kind of the opposite way. We saw him start to take 59%, 73%, 78%. So we've got two players kind of going in opposite directions here. So I'm going to take McMillan and just the volume of snaps here in this game.
Yeah, the only thing that gives me a little bit of pause. So I have McDuffie just slightly higher than McMillan, and it's because McMillan's PFF grades are like in that danger zone. He's got a 29.8 grade in run defense for the season so far. Granted, lots of bad players are great IDP assets, but like you said, we're trying to also do a little bit of projecting of snap counts. I can't imagine a defensive minded coach is going to put up with that level of play for too terribly long. And it's not like his pass rush grade is all that more redeemable, or his overall grade. And McDuffie's not, setting the world on fire either, but he is still significantly higher in terms of PFF grades. I think these are both guys who could be on thin ice within the next couple of weeks. And I would lean McDuffie this week, in part because, like you said, the Rams do have that run-heavy offense, and they're both relatively comparable matchups against LBs so far this season. But I would, I hate giving conflicting advice because it makes it harder for the listener to make a decision. But I lean McDuffie, but they're both in the same tier for me because I not only grade all the players, but then I put them in tiers, and they're in that kind of like solid for deeper leagues tier, where neither one is someone who I'm too excited about playing.
Yeah. And I think these are a lot of the questions we're going to get over the next couple of weeks, because between injuries and bye weeks, these are going to be players who you're not feeling great about rolling out, but we're at the point of the season where we kind of have to. Injuries have been just decimating, draft capital this year. So thanks for the question, JJ. Hopefully you make the right call there. Trayvon Wallace or Dorian Williams this week for Carter, looking at linebackers. So Trayvon Wallace is probably going to play every single snap this week, with Shaq Thompson going on IR with his ACL, MCL, something. And then
it was not good. I watched that game. That was just you hate to see it for him, because everyone seemed to think that he was playing on borrowed time, but he was still playing. And when he went down, it looked significant, and it's just. Yeah, that really sucks for him after all the injuries he's had and all the comebacks that he's made.
Yeah, and he was really playing some of his best ball of his career too. Like he was really kind of balling out. And then Josie Jewell, his running mate, also left the game. Hamstring injury. I think he's out for this week as well. So Trevin Wallace is obviously the guy there right now. And then Dorian Williams. Interesting with Dorian Williams, Terrell Bernard might be back this week for the Bills. And so if he does, he kind of becomes that second linebacker there. Right now he's kind of like the 1A and the 1B with Balin Spector. So I'm probably going to lean Dorian Williams this week, just because he's more of a known for me. Trevin Wallace, he's going to be in that new spot and at the linebacker role. He might be the green dot wearer this week, so that's a lot of pressure on a rookie going into his fourth or fifth game. So I'm going to lean Dorian Williams just because of the body of work for me. So
yep, I agree. The only thing that changes it for me is if for some reason Bernard does come back this week, then I'd flip him, because I have no idea what that second spot's going to be. I know historically the Bills had liked to have kind of direct backups for each of their players, where it wasn't, okay, our third best LB is going to step in for Milano or step in for whoever else. It was, no, this is Milano's replacement. This is this guy's replacement. So I don't know who is going to play that role, or if they do kind of change philosophies and have a rotation. Right. So if he is clearly the starter, I'd go with him. I like Wallace for rest of season, but we also kind of need to see how he's utilized and what the Panthers do there.
The nice thing is the Bills do have an early 12 o'clock game, so you'll get clarification on that right away. So good luck to you, Carter. Hey, he's picking one: Cody Barton, Troy Reeder, Trevin Wallace. I feel like Trevin Wallace is going to be the name of the day today. So see, we got Cody Barton playing against the Raiders. We got Troy Reeder playing against the Packers, and then Trevin Wallace going up against the Bears earlier today. So again, I think all of these players are kind of in that LB3 range right now. They're not like the super sexy pick right now. Of them, I think probably Cody Barton, unfortunately, might be the sexiest name of them. So if you're into into that sort of thing, then I guess Cody Barton's the guy for me. So
Yeah, Barton played 100% of snaps last week, and that's something that you always love to see. So I think given buys and everything, I agree. Usually they're LB3s. I've got them more in that LB2 range, at least for Barton and Reader. I have Wallace significantly lower just because I'm projecting snaps for him, and I don't have like that good hard data to fall back on, and less snaps for their grades and everything. So I agree. It's Barton for me, and I think he can end up, you know you never know what you're going to get with Cody Barton. He's one of those IDP assets that just refuses to ever go away. But given the fact that he's playing 100% of snaps, Reader has a slightly better matchup, fantasy matchup at least this week, but not enough to overcome that 100% snap rate. And Barton's also had better PFF grades than Reader so far this year. And again, that's a small part of my modeling, but whenever you have a coin flip between two guys, that can be enough, because you're going to hear me talk about PFF grades a lot. It's not the be all end all. In my model, it's maybe 10% of my total evaluation. And usually I do a little bit more fine grained tuning for DL and that I do all my weekly stuff on. But I would also go Barton just because the talent this season so far has been a little bit better. Snaps are great for both of them. I don't think you can make a bad call there. I definitely would not go Wallace, though, especially over these two.
Yeah, good call. Speaking of defensive linemen, here's one for you, Scott. Carter he's got a choice between Byron Young or Kayvon Thibodeau this week. So thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I've got both as tier 2 plays. So that's that solid tier for me. So these are good options. I do have Thibodeau a little bit higher. Looks like there's about 4 names separating them. So they really are pretty tightly grouped here. But, both play the exact same percentage of snaps last week at 82%, which is fantastic for any kind of defensive lineman. There are a few players that play much better than that. Byron Young's pass rush grade is 73.6. Thibodeau's 61.7. So, that leans Young a little bit. But overall, in looking at kind of the totality of their work, their matchups, neither one of them has too sexy of a matchup to be able to exploit. I'm a little bit higher on Thibodeau, but I was looking initially at the tiers. I looked at their scores. They actually have the exact same score for me. So that's why I'm kind of doing this back and forth in real time. But I think I would probably still go Thibodeau over Young, but you can convince me otherwise. This isn't one where I have a real strong feeling.
No, I'm with you there. And like you said, they're kind of in that same tier. So you're just kind of looking at the matchups and pieces, the coin flip there. So I'm with you. Good luck to you, Carter. Scott, an offensive question: Antonio Gibson or Kareem Hunt? All the news I heard this week out of New England is that Gibson is going to get the rock and be the guy. So I would rather have that than maybe a mix of Hunt, Steele combo platter. So I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of players I'll be playing over Kareem Hunt just because I don't know and it's not just Steele, it's also Pirine, who got some goal line touches last week, I believe, even. So it's Gibson for me as well.
Thanks, Scott. Summer, back on the show. Good morning. I need to choose 3 out of Trevin Wallace, Ajis. I know he's dealing with an injury. Bernard coming back from a pec injury, and Bolton. Need to choose 3 out of these. I guess so. I would rank them probably this week just because of the illnesses and the pec injuries. I would probably go Bolton as my 1, just because he's the only one not dealing with something. And then I'm probably going to go Ajish, Ojulari, and then Trevin Wallace, and then Bernard. I don't know if Bernard is back 100% yet. So if he is, the nice thing is all these games are early games. So Houston and Bills play against each other. So we'll have the report there. So that'll be a coin flip. So then I think that's your decision there. So go Bolton and Wallace for sure. And then you can kind of make the coin flip between Bernard and Ajish, since they both play in the same game. You kind of got your backup plan already built in.
Yeah, I agree with you completely on Wallace and Bolton. I would definitely go Bernard, though, over Ojulari. just because Ojulari is clearly the rotational piece there now. He played 34% of snaps last week, so he's in that dart throw territory for me. And if you're in a league where he's classified as a linebacker and not an edge, I very rarely play edges in linebacker slots. I like to go with those more protected points for actual linebackers. And
Is
if
that
Bernard,
Ajish Al-Shire, though? Is that Ajish Al-Shire?
oh, I was thinking Aziz Ojulari. I was
Yeah,
going
yeah,
with a different
okay.
Aziz. So many Azizes in the league, it's easy to
Yeah.
get confused. Oh yeah, sorry. Aziz Al-Shire, I'm a huge fan of. I have him. I'm starting him in a bunch of leagues. It's good to know he's dealing with illness because I haven't checked that out. And when we hop off, I'll have to check his status for myself. But yes, I was thinking Ojulari. Ojulari's an afterthought. He's droppable in most leagues. But I wasn't trying to be like, why are you even considering Ojulari here?
Yeah.
But so Wallace, Bolton, and Al-Shire, I think that's the way to go.
Yeah. All right. Phew. Good luck to you, Summer. All right. Clint's got a couple questions coming in here. So I want to let you take the defensive line question. You got picking two here, Adegbo versus the Jags, who's probably going to be an every down player for the Colts. We got Will Anderson, who's kind of been a little disappointing this season so far, hasn't really had the start, or Herbig versus the Cowboys. So you get to pick two of those. So Scott, who are you leaving off of that list this week?
This week, leaving Odengbigo. Oh man, I knew I was gonna. I panicked as soon as the word started coming out of my mouth. I'm not gonna say who I'm leaving out. I'm gonna take Herbig and I'm gonna take Anderson. I think that I had Odengbo as one of my streamers for this week, so I do like him. I think he's a very good potential play. Curious to see how those snap shares actually go with Wallace out. I think Pay is not too far from returning, based on what I was looking up earlier in the week as I was writing up the DL streaming article. So what you're getting with Anderson. You're getting great snaps. Herbig had a down week last week, and I understand if that scares people off of him, but he still has a ton of talent. His season pass rush grade is still an 87.6, even after having more snaps. So the ceiling is definitely there. And so I would go with Anderson and Herbig.
Perfect. Clint has a question on the safety from the Raiders, Isaiah Palomao, stepping in obviously for the injured Marcus Epps, who was out for the season. He had a pretty good game last week, so I'm comfortable with him as like as we go through these bye weeks and things like that. Maybe a back end DB2, DB3, probably in most leagues on volume alone. Just kind of my thoughts on him are he's gonna play. That defense is really banged up, so just in space talking about him, I see him as a back end DB2, probably a strong DB3 the rest of the season. So
if he's on your waivers, snag him, and we'll see if he can sustain this kind of performance. I did not end up getting him in most of my leagues because people were bidding on him as if this is going to be the standard performance coming off of last week. It could be, but he's a guy who totally came off the radar. And there have been plenty of guys who just come out of the woodwork. I remember Frankie Louvu being like, I'm not going to pick up Frankie Louvu. Who the hell is even this guy? And then he ended up being a pretty awesome IDP asset. So if you can get him for free and you're not giving up too much in terms of who you're cutting, he's a fine guy to have in stash for me. I wouldn't rely on him yet until we see more of this performance, unless you're in bye week hell or dealing with other injuries or things like that. So I think the potential is there for him to be one of these, sneaky waiver wire plays that ends up helping you win some games. But I think it's still potential for now. So if he's easy enough to get, I wouldn't trade for him. I wouldn't trade any asset for him. And I wouldn't use too much of my fab if he's still out there next week. But if you can get him for free on waivers, I would get him. I probably just wouldn't play him quite yet until we see a little bit more consistency.
And this week he does get the Broncos, so that might not be the best litmus test litmus test for him too. He did play 100% of snaps, which is something we always love seeing.
Mm-hmm.
That's volume is always king. So Clint, I guess if he's available, maybe snag and stash and just kind of see what we get for another week. So best of luck there to you, Clint. Another offensive question: need one wide receiver, one flex. So wide receivers are Chase Brown, Trey Tucker. I'm assuming Keon Coleman.
Mm-hmm.
And then one flex, and then so Chase Brown, throw into that mixer, Jerome Ford. So who's your flavor of the week at wide receiver there? Tank Dell, Trey Tucker, or Keon Coleman?
Oh, probably Tank Dell, because I like that offense the most. There are a lot of mouths to feed, and you have no idea who's going to have a big game in any given week. So, as far as the wide receivers go, I think it's Tank Dell. And then for the running backs, this one's a little bit easier for me. I'm wearing my Bengals hat. I like the Bengals. I liked seeing what Chase Brown did last week, but he is still 100% in a committee, whereas Jerome Ford is still the primary back in Cleveland. Last I saw, I'm not locked into Cleveland beat reporters or anything like that, but Ford to me is a much safer play. I like Brown's outlook long term because I saw that they did designate Chubb to return, so that opened up the window for that. Whereas I think Ford's star is going to be going down, whereas Brown's will likely be ascending. But for this week, it's Ford, and then for the wide receiver, I'd lean Tank Dell.
I'm glad you didn't say the Brown star is going down. So that was good on your part. I'm actually going to go with Trey Tucker this week as my wide receiver, and then Jerome Ford. So I just like Tucker's role in that offense without Devontae Adams. He's definitely a buy right now if you can get him from a manager who's not very wary of what's going on with the Devontae Adams saga. So I really like Tucker going forward. I think he's going to be a gadget piece to that offense. So if you're looking for, maybe that upside play with Tucker or Dell, and then you go at the safe floor of Ford before his star goes down. So we'll go with that. So Summer's got another one here. Should I drop Latu or pay for Hufunga? Someone dropped him. I have Kean White, Crosby, and Granderson as my other defensive lineman. Appreciate it. I don't know if this is a dynasty league, but I definitely would not be dropping any of those for a safety. I just feel that those defensive linemen hold value much more than like any defensive back. So, if you were looking at those defensive linemen, Scott, who would be the one you'd be most willing to let go?
I'd be more willing to let Pay go than Latu at this point, just because I feel like we've seen at least some of Pay to know that okay, he's a good player. He might end up being a great player, but he hasn't really shown too much of that elite production yet, which is part of the reason why the Colts went out and got Latu in the draft. So I think Latu is another one of these ascending guys. I think he's going to only have more opportunities for snap shares. While we were talking, I did look up and saw Pay has been ruled out for this week, so that does help. All of the remaining defensive ends for the Colts, and I don't think him being out this week just makes him droppable. And I agree. I wouldn't drop a DL for very many DBs just because, I'm a believer in DL streaming in some situations. But the reason I got into DL streaming is because I was doing so much DB streaming. And I thought, okay, what if I can apply some of these concepts to this other position where there's so much volume in terms of the players that are getting snaps? So I wouldn't drop either of them for Hufunga. I like Hufunga when he's healthy. I think he can be a top fantasy asset as a safety, but he's had a hard time staying healthy. And I think the ceiling for Latu and Pay is both better, and the value over replacement. There's just lots of reasons why I wouldn't drop either of them for Hufunga. As much as I like Hufunga, if you had somebody else, like I'm someone who holds on to offensive assets after 4 years of no production because I think, hey, Will Fuller might come back this year, and if he links up with Deshaun Watson, there's a chance. So if you have one of those people that you're dream casting a role for them, especially on offense, which is where I tend to stash those guys, you might turn one of them for Hufunga to have them on your roster. But if these are your your bottom tier players right now, I wouldn't be moving on for either of them from him.
Yep. Great advice there. Good luck to you, Summer. Big JP wants to know, should I trade Dan Henley for Okereke? If I could look into my crystal ball and figure out with what Harbaugh is going to do with his linebackers, if he's going to continue to rotate all three of them, absolutely. I think Okereke is, clear cut ahead of all of those linebackers. So I think if you can make that move, this is a prime example of taking a player selling high at their peak and then capitalizing on that. So this is an easy one for me. So I would definitely want the Okereke piece on the side.
Yeah, I agree. We know his role. We know his production. He is a locked in linebacker every week in your starting lineups. Whereas Henley could be. I feel like Henley's ceiling is Okereke. So why not just have Okereke instead and just enjoy that ceiling in real time?
Yep. Yeah, you're hoping that the one is the other when you can just have the one that's perfect right now. So thanks for the question. Love those trade questions too. Spartacus is back this morning. Good morning, gentlemen. Up against the Kirk London stack. So he is definitely chasing already this week for some big numbers. Mm-hmm. Are you playing Mad Max versus Denver, or are you taking a shot with Herbig versus Dallas? So Max is still questionable at this time. He's trending towards playing as the last I saw. And I think the first part of this statement is the key piece here. He's looking for a home run. And so these are two players that are definitely capable of putting up a home run. Crosby's is a weekly winner for you. And we saw in week 3 what Herbig did with opportunity with Highsmith out. So, Scott, I'm going to defer to you once again with the defensive line question here. So,
yeah, I can't not go Crosby. If he's playing, we know what he can put up for you. Neither one is really a very advantageous matchup for defensive ends. So it's not like, skill set is similar, snap shares are similar. So who has the exploitable matchup? Neither one of them at the surface. I don't have the actual offensive line grades in front of me. I just have the fantasy points allowed to position for the season. So, I think it's Max, because even if Max is playing a team that has been good against ends, he's the kind of end that can change that and make it so that suddenly their fantasy points allowed is not nearly as strong against the position. So if he's playing, and the last thing I saw was a report 4 hours ago that he is trending in that direction. So if he's playing, I'd play him. And if he's not, then I think Herbig is riskier. And I know that you're looking for a big swing after being in a bit of a hole, but I think if I had to lay odds on which one is likely to have a multi-sack game, I would lean Crosby, just because we've seen him do it a lot more, even dinged up.
Yeah, Denver is the 7th best pass blocking team right now, and Dallas is the 21st best pass blocking team at the moment. So I don't know. Does that change your answer at all? Does it make it a little cloudy? I was all in on Crosby right away. Like when I saw looking for big numbers, Crosby's your guy. Like we've seen him do it week in and week out. So
yeah, I think it's still Crosby for me. I'm just trying to look up really quickly the distribution of how that offensive line of the Cowboys has been. Because
I do like the safety net that he has here too, because with Vegas playing late in the afternoon, but then he's even got his
Sunday
backup
night
plan even later. So I think you're in a win-win situation here, Chris. I think if you plan on playing Crosby, unless you hear otherwise, and then you can always defer to Herbig. So I think that's a win-win for you.
Yep.
Got another one here for looking at linebackers. We've got Kendricks versus Pittsburgh, Roquan Smith versus Cincinnati, or Speed versus Jacksonville. I love Speed, but this matchup is just gross. Jacksonville has been one of the worst matchups for opposing linebackers all season. Kendricks has been really performing well. They get a pretty nice matchup. They're the best matchup for opposing linebackers. So Kendricks for me is my 1. I'm going to go Speed 2, and Smith is 3.
Really, Roquan at 3.
Speed is just, he's been putting up really solid numbers all season long. Is that Cincinnati offense run heavy enough?
No, you're right. They are primarily a pass heavy offense, yeah, but we do run it with both Moss and Brown,
Yep.
and Burrow against the Ravens. I have every expectation that he's gonna put up one head scratching pick, possibly two, a linebacker like Roquan Smith.
Yeah.
So it's so hard for me in any circumstance to say the words bench Roquan Smith.
Yeah.
I know Kendricks has been balling out this season, and that's a very advantageous matchup. So I would almost go Kendricks and Smith and sit Speed. But again, I think this is going to be one of those situations where at the end of the week, you're going to have 24 points, 23 points, and 22 points for them. So, I think you're nice job drafting to be able to get all three of them.
And I think that's kind of been a theme too with a lot of our listeners. We've had a lot of like really tough questions with lineups, and they've done an amazing job of drafting, because if they have, even in a bye week with all the injuries that the league has sustained, and we're still having questions, like these are probably all borderline LB1s this week, for week
Absolutely.
5, and if you're having to decide between 3 LB1s for a week, considering we're on buys and everything else, I think you've done a great job drafting. So hats off to you, Chris. So just to clarify, Scott, you're going to go Kendrick, Smith, Speed?
Yep, that's the 3 in order for me.
Okay. All right.
And I think we just flipped the last one because you had Speed too, right?
Yeah. Kendrick has a great matchup this week. I love that one for him. So
yeah. And it's funny, I took a peek on my second screen. Again, there are some people who you really trust with certain positions. And so I looked up Mike Wollert's linebacker rankings this week. Smith 2, Kendricks 3, Speed 4. So three pretty solid options, and pretty closely aligned with what we were saying, although he had Smith as the top of that group, where we had him at kind of that 2-3 spot.
Yeah, that's a great grouping of talent right there, apparently. So, but what does Mike know about linebackers anyway? So
yeah,
just some guy with a green dot. All right, Clint's got another one here. Crazy question: Trevin Wallace or TJ Edwards today? I can't not play TJ Edwards. He's just been too consistent. I know that he's had a couple like hiccup games his last couple, 2 out of the 4 games this season so far, but he can at any time just take it over. And Wallace is just being a question mark. I'm gonna wait to see what it looks like for real before I risk him in the lineup.
Yeah, I completely agree. Edwards is one of those guys, if you have him, you roll him out there. Wallace could be great, but again, this is kind of what's Wallace's best case scenario. Wallace's best case scenario is Edwards' average game. So as long as Edwards has his average game, it's a whole lot safer to put him out there. And granted, averages are going to move, and you're going to have some games that are below and some games that are above. But I feel like Edwards is still head and shoulders above of Wallace for now.
Scott, do you have Mike's rankings? Where does he have TJ Edwards this week? Just by
as
long as
he has Edwards at 5.
Oh, okay, yeah. I know he's a huge Edwards fan. He's like one of those he's going to ride him till he dies kind of player. So
yeah, and he likes Wallace too. I just looked him up. He's 23, so he's a back end LB2. But for me, I know I'm not the linebacker king or anything like that, far from it. But I'm more risk averse, I suppose, with my fantasy play style, where if I'm injury thin or bye week thin, I would consider playing Wallace. But if I have even probably the next 10 or 15 options that Mike has below Wallace, I'd probably still play one of them, just as a personal taste preference for me to avoid risk, unless I was playing a Cousins London stack, and it's like, all right, well, yeah, maybe we can roll the dice. But I'm more of a dice roller at positions like edge and DT and safety and corner than linebackers. Linebackers, I always trust on being that core, 40 to 70 point block in my IDP score, depending on how many of them we start in a given league. And then if I'm playing around at the margins, I'll play more edges as my IDP flex, or more defensive tackles who have good matchups as my IDP flex to chase those sacks. Because I chase sacks a lot more than I chase interceptions, because they're a lot easier to predict than interceptions. So, long-winded way of saying Edwards is definitely the play today, and I think that if you want to take a shot with Wallace, that's fine. But in terms of linebackers, I like proven performance more than potential, like a highly exploitable matchup, or directions and snap shares or things like that.
And as gross as it sounds, I almost trust Carolina's run game more than I do the Bears' run game. Like we've seen Chuba Hubbard become very fantasy relevant the last couple of weeks. So, and Carolina's probably going to lean on that more so than, even like Swift last week, who had a great game. It was kind of on a couple fluky plays, and there just hasn't been that consistent run game for the Bears yet. And whereas Carolina is probably more traditional with Dalton under center, where they're going to run, and Hubbard's proven that, he's going to tote the rock, 18, 19 times a game. So, there's just probably more opportunity for Edwards to get a tackle or two there, whereas Wallace is going to be, maybe chasing a tight end or chasing Swift out of the backfield. So, All right. Best of luck to you, Clint. Thanks for the questions once again. Robert has a question. Do we think Xavier Woods pushes into the box more with the Lobby situation in Carolina? Big points last week. So I think if he pushed into it last week with both of the, Thompson and Jewell at least in the game for some of it, now definitely probably more. So what do you think there, Scott?
Yeah, this is part of the reason why I'm so nervous about Wallace. Excuse me. I just don't know what the role is going to be, and I am concerned about them just bringing a guy like Woods down into the box more, and what that does for the linebacker efficiency. So I don't have a good answer that I think he is going to do this or isn't going to do that. I think it's going to depend somewhat on how Wallace plays, and he's a younger guy. He's got a different skill set than Shaq Thompson or Josie Jewell. So good defensive coordinators can scheme based on the guys that are out there. And so I don't know how much of that was the team adjusting to those injuries and kind of band-aiding it with having Woods up, and they might drop him back more again this week with a week of practice with a set of linebackers that are going to be your starters. So he's like Wallace. I'm not super interested in many Panthers linebackers or safeties this week, just because, honestly, I'm not too excited about many Panthers players, period, on either side of the ball. But especially when it comes to the roles that people are going to be in and the alignments that they're going to be in, your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the snap shares get allotted this week, and if that's going to be a trend going forward. If Jewell is able to make it back after this week, or if he's going to be a little bit longer on the shelf. So, David wants to know Trayvon Wallace or Cody Barton. Pretty easy Barton for me on this one. We've kind of talked a lot about Wallace, so. Here's your favorite emoji or your favorite little icon.
Yep.
So Jason's back. So he wanted to. Yep. So Jason wants to know: do we start any of these players over Spillane, Dorian Williams, or JOK? Trevin Wallace, Drew Tranquill, or Terrell Dodson? I'm assuming that is Dodson in Seattle. Mm-hmm. He would probably be the closest one for me, and I might put him in over Dorian Williams.
Yeah, I could see that. I like JOK's upside. Spillane is a lock for me. So I was just saying, I like to go with only safe linebackers. There are a few that have that, good coverage ability where they can snag a pick. Like I think Logan Wilson, gets a lot of interceptions at the linebacker position. You've got others that can be good blitzers as well, like Frankie Luvu and JOK. So I think Spillane is those safe points. JOK is a little bit less safe points, but a higher ceiling. And then in that middle, I think Dodson's kind of like JOK in that he can do some pass rushing. he can be that kind of versatile boom bust. The issue there is, he's dinged up at the moment, and you don't know if and how much he's going to play and how he's going to be used. Whereas Williams, assuming Bernard is still out, we know his role because we saw it last week. So I would probably stick with Williams, Spillane, and JOK, unless we get some news about the Bills linebackers, or obviously if Dodson gets ruled out. But I wouldn't really be considering Wallace or Tranquil over Williams at this point.
Okay. Like it. And I love JOK this week, especially with Hicks out. I think he's going to have a big week this week. Mm-hmm. So David back with another question here. Also picked up Kyle Duggar on waivers. Is he good to go, or is he a good hold until he gets healthy? He's absolutely a great hold until he gets healthy. He's probably a weekly DB1. He's playing a really hybrid role for that Patriots. He's listed as a defensive back, but plays a lot of in the box snaps. So he's definitely a great hold. So great move on your part, picking him up for nothing.
Yeah, I agree. And I just looked up all the most recent news, and it's all believed to have avoided serious injury. Get good news on Duggar, dodged a bullet with major injuries. So he is a great stash, and likely one that you will be able to reap the dividends of here sooner rather than later, compared to a lot of the other guys who would kind of pick up and say, all right, we got him for next season. I don't think this is likely one of those situations.
And he was kind of limited, questionable this week, so there's even a chance, maybe as soon as next week he can even get back on the field. So
yeah.
All right, Rob is back asking questions about two defensive backs: Adebo, Witherspoon, Rayshawn Jenkins, or Brandon Jones. So I got two true cornerbacks in this one, and then true safeties. So Rayshawn Jenkins, I know, is probably going to be locked in as a starter for me. I just like the consistency from a safety versus a cornerback. The cornerbacks are kind of boom bust for me, so I'm gonna go Rayshawn Jenkins for one for sure. And then if I had to go one, I probably am gonna lean Brandon Jones this week, just because of the safety, but also because of the role on that defense. Now with Singleton out, we saw Barton have 100% of snaps, and like we had said last week, Brandon Jones might assume a little bit more of the in the box role, and he had a great game last week with that. So I'm gonna lean with the two safeties, just out of bias. But Scott, what are you thinking?
Yeah, Brandon Jones is my Quentin Lake. Like, I have him pretty much everywhere. I've had him pretty much everywhere for years. So you're going to have a hard time talking me out of him. And like you, if I'm in a place where I don't have to start corners, I very rarely, if ever, start corners. So if I'm playing in a DB league, I'm looking safety as much as possible, unless everyone else is doing that, in which case then you can pivot and get one of the top couple of corners, like you're talking about here with Adebo. And I know Witherspoon hasn't had as great of a fantasy season so far this year, but I'm with you. I go safeties over corners in general, and I think these are two pretty good safeties. So this is an easy one for me.
Yeah, good. Perfect. Thanks for the question, Rob. Armando, half point PPR, Olave, Higgins, or Deontay Johnson? Ooh, this is a tough group. Olave probably jumps as the highest floor for me, and probably the highest ceiling. But man, Deontay Johnson's really having a good season right now with Dalton under center.
Yeah, I think it's Olave. He is the top option in probably the second best offense of the three of those teams. I mean, you could argue it's the best based on how they've done so far this year, but I'd still trust Burrow over David Carr in every format, every league, every week, as someone who has Carr in a couple of places. And I'm glad that he's had the start that he's had, but Olave is the clear number one in that offense. And he's been used like it. I think I'd probably even lean Higgins over Johnson, just because you don't know what you're going to get with that Panthers offense from week to week. I know Andy Dalton has looked great. Andy Dalton has had a lot of stretches in his career where he has looked great. And still, he's been a backup on all these teams over the past few years because he's great in stretches. I can't trust anything coming out of Carolina right now. Not to make any Panthers fans upset, but knowing a couple of Panthers fans, I think they would probably agree with that if they're at least somewhat clear-eyed. So I think it's Olave and then Higgins and then Johnson for me. But these are three good wide receiver 2 options.
Yeah, and I think, we taking the bias out of it. I think that's great, Scott. That just being transparent and honest about it. Like, you don't want to offend anyone, but actually, we're here to help people win games. So, Carolina bias aside, I think that's what we got to do. So, Joe's got a couple of questions coming up here. I have Kittle. He starts at 4. Do you think he plays? I have Ertz as my backup. He plays at 1. I think Kittle played last week, didn't he?
I think so.
Yeah, I didn't hear anything that he was going to be out or anything like that. Kittle played 94% of snaps last week, so I have a hard time believing that he's not going to be in this week.
Yeah, and I just looked up the news 3 hours ago. Kittle, Fred Warner, both expected to play. So
perfect.
I think the talent for Kittle is just so much higher than Ertz. Ertz has been a sneaky good play, and that's been a sneaky good offense. But still, George Kittle is one of those tight ends that you can't sit if he's going to play, and it looks like he is going to play.
Scott, is that you coming around on the Washington offense?
Oh, I knew this was coming. I knew. I
okay.
saw
all
the
right,
look in your eye.
All right, next question. Amari Cooper or Wicks for the Packers this week? I would not be able to sit Amari Cooper.
Same.
Yeah,
I agree. That's an
as fun as Wicks is going to be. Yeah, as fun as Wicks is going to be this next couple of weeks with Dobbs has got the team suspension for
skipping practice
in the building
right?
issues. Yeah. In the building issues, they said. So yeah, we're going to go Cooper this week. So Najee or Coleman? I think with Jalen Warren out, Najee's the easy one for me.
Yeah, and I know Cordero Patterson left last week's game early too. I haven't had a chance to check the injury report to see if he's going to go and what kind of role he'll be in, but it's Najee here for me as well.
Tyrone Tracy, because Singleton is probably going to be out. Singletary, sorry. Tyrone Tracy, Ramo Odunze, George Kittle. Oh, Tolbert. I like that one, especially with Brandon Cooks going on IR. Picking 2.
I'm Kittle and Tracy. If Singletary is out, if he is, I also need to make some adjustments in some of my lineups because I got him cheap in a lot of places and have been leveraging him. But if it's going to be the lead running back in a situation, I'm going to skew towards that for those save points. And the Bears just have so many mouths to feed. It seems like their offense has started to come around a little bit, but it's still not doing what we expected it to do. Tolbert has played well lately, but especially with Cooks out, he's going to get the snaps. I think that Kittle is more of a known commodity. I know tight ends have been a crapshoot this year, but for me, it's Tracy and Kittle. How about you?
I'm going to go Kittle and Tolbert just because, like we had mentioned earlier, like the unknown, like we really haven't seen a lot of Tracy in the offense, and that Giants offense is just going to look putrid without Neighbors in there this week. So I think that's going to kind of have a bigger impact just on him out being alone. But so Tolbert, I think Prescott's got to have a second guy to throw to. So I'm going to go Kittle and Tolbert for me. Joe wants to know Deshaun Elliott or Julian Blackmon this week. Elliott gets a great matchup for playing for Pittsburgh. It's going to be impossible for me to sit Julian Blackmon, though. Just that role in that Colts defense is just too many box snaps to not play him.
Yeah, I agree. I was just looking up their snaps, and I liked Elliott as a sneaky play last week. I think he still has potential. I think he's still a safety 2 probably, but I like Blackmon's ceiling more, his role more. I'm more in on Blackmon. So I think both good players, good decision to have to make, both in that safety 2 territory. But I would go Blackmon as well.
Does the matchups in those games have anything? Like we see the Colts are taking on Jacksonville, which we know is not a very good matchup for opposing defenses. And then we have the Cowboys, for the Steelers. They're going to be a little more sustainable on drives, maybe to give Elliott a little bit more, or still sticking with Blackmon?
I think I'm still sticking with Blackman. I'm looking up the stats kind of in real time here, and Pittsburgh so far this season, if you tune it into safeties in particular, they're giving up an average of 32.89 points to safeties, which is respectable. It's definitely not bad. And then Blackman is playing against Jacksonville, and of course, I'm gonna have a hard time finding that right now. There we go. 37.24. So it's kind of six in one hand, half dozen in the other. Neither one is like an awesome matchup for safeties. Neither one is a scary matchup for safeties either. So I would still lean Blackman.
Yep, same. All right, so Chiz, that moment. I think that's how you say it. I have Dorian Williams, linebacker for Buffalo, in because Branch is out for Detroit. Spillane is my other guy. Any sleepers that you can suggest for a 14 team league? Love the show. So looking at linebackers, probably, considering we're in the buys, considering all the injuries, considering, we've got a game going on right now, so you're out those. Scott, is there anyone jumping off the page for you as far as a linebacker throw? I'm thinking, like, is it possible that like an Overshone is out there? Probably not.
I mean, in a 14 team league, I think it'd be tough to find one where Overshone is available.
Yeah.
And
Justin
this is gross. I don't like saying this given utilization with the team so far, but Ventrell Miller might be someone to look at. The Jaguars have been, like I said, really gross even when their players were healthy. They're not healthy now. Miller played 84% of snaps last week, which is one of the highest snap shares for any Jacksonville linebacker across the season, even when they had all their normal guys out there. I don't know if Lloyd's status has been clarified. I can't remember exactly what happened with him because honestly, I don't lock into the linebackers as much. But assuming, I know Foye is out, but assuming Lloyd's not playing, I think that Ventrell Miller could be a sneaky kind of play. Anthony Walker in Miami, and again, check injury reports on some of these things to see if they're going to be getting the same snaps because the guys that they were in for, like I don't know David Long's status. I got to check
back
that.
in.
He is.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Good.
Yeah.
Because he's another guy.
Maybe like maybe Justin Strnad from the Broncos, kind of playing that Cody Barton role now. He played almost 80% of snaps last week. He would be a guy I would look at. Just trying to go through maybe a Tyrese Knight for Seattle with Jerome Baker being out. He's probably not available in a 14 team. He shouldn't be. Just trying to look at teams and trying to think of who else.
Here's one for you. Claudin Cherilus
there you go.
Carolina. So if Jewel
you love your Panthers,
he's if Jewel doesn't play, he's likely gonna be out there for a decent number of snaps. But these are some real, this isn't just a dart throw. This is trying to weave it from one end of the bar all the way to the other over a bunch of stuff and onto the board. So I don't know. Those are a couple of guys to think about. Linebacker streaming, linebacker, waivers are always pretty brutal because, especially if you're on sleeper, most teams have two linebackers who play in a given week, whereas they have 4 or 5 DL, 4 or 5 DBs. And so it's a lot easier to find value in those two positions just out there on the waiver wire, even in 14 or 16 team leagues. In 14 team leagues in particular, linebackers, the pool that's out there is probably going to be pretty gross for you. But again, I would just look at who's out and who their backup is. And, you might have a guy like I said, like Claudin Cherilus or Ventrell Miller or, other guys who you can, Tyrese Knight, you can put in and maybe get some snaps out of.
Even maybe like a Dennis Gardeck for Arizona, who's maybe got some dual eligibility for defensive line and linebacker. He's been kind of feast or famine, but feasting more. So I know it's pretty gross with 14 team league. So best of luck to you there, Ches. Rob has Pratt or Watt. not knowing the scoring, depending on the scoring, if it's a sack heavy league, you get rewarded for, obviously Watt's going to be your guy, but if it's a tackle heavy league, that might give a little prowess to Pratt just because of the consistency there. So Rob, depending on the scoring, if it's sack heavy, big 3-ish kind of scoring, I'm going Watt all day, every day. But if it's a tackle heavy league, I'm going to go Pratt.
Yeah, I lean Watt just because he is if not the best, one of the 3 best at his position. Pratt is putting up great fantasy numbers this year. He's still the second best linebacker on his own team compared to Logan Wilson. So I lean Watt unless it's very tackle heavy. So it doesn't have to be big points for sacks for me to go Watt over Pratt. But if it's a system that is really way too far in terms of pushing tackles, then I can kind of see a narrow case for Pratt. But to me, Watt just has that upside where even if sacks are only worth maybe 3 and tackles are worth 1, a sack is also a tackle and a TFL, and so you're going to get all those stacks there. And I'd still lean Watt in most scoring formats.
Sean has a question: Max Crosby or Robert Spillane? So this again is one of those, depending on scoring, the nice thing is you have both these players in one game. You're going to know the availability of Crosby.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a sack heavy league, or you get rewarded, like Scott was just kind of saying about how you get, the sack, the tackle for a loss, and a tackle, that could be an 8 or a 10 point play easily, whereas a regular tackle is just 2 points. So if it is rewarding well for sacks, then I think Crosby is probably be your answer, whereas Spillane is going to be that safe high floor linebacker every week. So again, depending on scoring for me.
Yeah, and I think that Spillane is a LB1 in most formats, but Crosby is one of those guys who could be the DL1 overall. So I know I was just talking about Watt as 1 or 2 or 3. Oh, Crosby is also in that exact same group, and I think Spillane is in a similar group. Probably I like Spillane more than Pratt, but they're not too far apart, I wouldn't think. So I would lean Crosby here as well. But the other nice thing, and we don't talk about this too much, but with it being a later kick, you're not only going to have a sense of who's playing, but how your week is going so far. And if you're already in a spot where you're protecting a lead or you're trying to come from behind, that can help you make some of these decisions, because I think it's safe to say that Crosby is the bigger upside play and Spillane is the bigger safe play. So depending on how your other players have done to that point and whether you're chasing points or you're protecting points, that can also be something that helps you to make this decision.
Yeah, that's a good call too. That's good thoughts. Mr. Rogaru, good morning. Good morning to you. Joe, you're most welcome. Thanks for checking out the show. Biggio or Diego Calvo, overshown over Bolton. He's always been high on Bolton, but he has not been the same in his opinion. So Overshown gets a great matchup versus the Steelers this week. We've got the Bolton and the Chiefs take on the Saints Monday night. So I think he's right on here about Bolton hasn't been the same since the injury. Prior to the injury, he was like in the conversation for top 6 linebacker week in and week out. Now he's kind of slid a little bit into that LB2, LB3 conversation. Overshown has come on, and he's definitely had his spike weeks with production, and I think he's kind of established himself as like the LB2 there next to Kendricks. So looking at the stats here, Overshown has played 78% in week 3, 86% in week 2. Damone Clark has just kind of been vanishing. We've also kind of seen the rise of Martise Lafu playing a little bit of that 3 linebacker, which is kind of interesting to see in Dallas for the first time since whenever. But I think I'm going to take the upside here of Overshown in a nice matchup versus Pittsburgh for me.
Yeah, and this goes against like almost all of my general philosophy of being super data driven, but because the Cowboys and the Chiefs get so many primetime games, I feel like I've got to see these guys both play a good bit, or if not primetime, at least like those featured 4 o'clock games that you're getting to see a lot of play. And Overshone really just jumps off the screen. Like, I'm not a big tape guy, and it may be my bias for some individual plays that I happen to notice, but Bolton, he is what he is. He just doesn't look as fresh and energetic, and he doesn't look like the same upside player as Overshone. So I lean Overshone here. I think that the Steelers, with the Cowboys down both of their edges, are going to be getting into the second level a lot with their running game tonight, and so that should be lots of opportunities for not just Kendricks but also Overshone.
Yeah, he does. He's all over the field all the time. Like, he's even making plays on special teams. He's out there, just it's crazy. So yeah, let's go Overshone this week. Best of luck to you, Diego. You're most welcome, Sean. Appreciate it. Currently have Trenton Simpson in play, but options of picking up Peyton Wilson or Khaleke Hudson. Thoughts, Mercy? I haven't. The Hudson love, I'm guessing, is coming from Willie Gay being ruled out for the Saints, and so if Demario Davis is back, Pete Werner I know is kind of dinged up, so I think Khaleke Hudson is probably a third or fourth option for the Saints. I know that they played DeMarco Jackson, excuse me, quite a bit last week, so he's farthest on there. Peyton Wilson, I would have a hard time taking out Trenton Simpson to put in Peyton Wilson in my lineups right now.
Yeah. And in some ways, it's what we were talking about earlier with, we know some roles and we're learning some roles. I feel like Trenton Simpson is a guy whose role we know. He hasn't necessarily produced the level we might have wanted him to. I think a lot of us had hopes that he'd be Patrick Queen's production from last year, and he hasn't been there just yet, but I wouldn't be cutting bait on him. I think Wilson is ascending. He's definitely overtaken Landon Roberts in recent weeks, but he's still as the second best option on a team that hasn't been as nearly as fantasy productive for linebackers. I mean, the Steelers get this reputation of, linebacker heavy teams, but Ryan Shazier was their last linebacker who had a top even 30 finish, I think, from some research I did over the summer. So you give me an LB2 and a lot more LB friendly system with Trenton Simpson. I think I would just stay with that one.
Yep. I'm with you. Yep.
And I know we talked about the Ecto Cooler before, but I also got to shout out Rougeroux's avatar. I don't know if it is Papa Shango, but even if it's not, it's as a wrestler from the early 90s who I remember scared the hell out of me as a kid. But that's an awesome. Gave me immediate nostalgia vibes to watching wrestling in my bedroom and turning it off before my parents would walk in because they didn't want me watching. Part of it because of the witch doctor.
Sounds like another offensive question here. Matthew wants to know Tank Dell or Keon Coleman this week. I'm going to have to lean Coleman here, just probably because of opportunity in that offense. Like you had mentioned earlier, Scott, too, about you don't know who is it going to be. Is it going to be Diggs? Is it going to be Collins, who seems to be like for sure the guy there? And then the other guys are just kind of picking up what's left over. So I'm going to go Coleman, but I don't feel great about it.
Yeah, I think Coleman could have a huge week, or he could also disappear. I think Dell is going to have a little bit more of a floor, but I think his ceiling might be, slightly more capped. I would lean Coleman because Khalil Shakir, he is what he is. It doesn't seem like he's going to be what a lot of folks hoped he was going to be coming into the year. Curtis Samuel feels like an afterthought. I haven't checked his snaps, but I remember he was some people were going out trading second round picks for Curtis Samuel coming into the offseason. It seems like Coleman has emerged as one of those primary targets along with Dalton Kincaid. But there are just less mouths to feed in Buffalo. So I would also lean Coleman.
Perfect. And then Rougeroux came back and helped you out here. So here's his avatar is giving tribute to his voodoo heritage. So.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, it's and I knew that stylistic, and like I said, I got first introduced to it by Papa Shango, and I just thought it looked so awesome, and I know that was a tribute to lots of other stuff that came before, but either way, I just thought it was a really cool avatar. So
Yeah.
thank you for the detail. I'll look that up after the
Yeah.
show.
Yeah. Roguru's been a big fan of the show for years now. So we
Hmm.
appreciate him. Maybe he can spread a little curse on some of our opponents this week so he can get us the win. So Sam wants to know in a full PPR, start either Brian Robinson, Zach Moss, or Zay Flowers. I think it's a slam dunk for Robinson for me. He's just been so consistent in that offense. And I know you love the Commanders offense. Like you've always been on board with them going forward. So I don't think there's even a question here. So
I agree with the call and nothing else. But
okay.
yes, that is a good call. Robinson was the one who jumped off the screen at me too.
Who's the number 2 there for you?
Oh, probably Zay Flowers at this point.
Okay.
I think that the Ravens are going to run the ball 572 times today against the Bengals because we have not been able to stop the run at all. So I don't know that there's going to be a lot of volume for Flowers, but I also don't know how much Zach Moss is going to play. I think this is going to be a shootout kind of game. I think we're getting some of our interior defenders back, but honestly, DJ Reader was our run stopper. He's not in the building anymore. So having BJ Hill back is great. Rankins has always been a liability against the run, but he's a great pass rusher. So I don't know how much volume is going to be there for Flowers, but I know he's going to play and he's not going to come off the field too much. So I would probably lean Flowers over Zach Moss at this point.
Yeah, he was my second there too. I just wanted to see where I was with the Zach Moss truthers out there. So
yeah, I'm looking up just in real time quickly here the distribution. Moss was 65%, 80%, 76, and then down to 60 last week. Chase Brown 33, 20, 24, and 40 last week. So they're trending in opposite directions. I think it's gonna be a timeshare. It's gonna be a committee. But I wouldn't want to play either Bengals running back this week until that solidifies a little bit more.
totally off script here. Do you think the 2025, 2026 running back is on the team right now?
Ooh. Yes.
Okay.
I think it will be Chase Brown. I do think that they're going to. Let me say this. I think it'll be Chase Brown plus. Like, I think it'll be Chase Brown plus Miles Sanders or Chase Brown plus Khalil Herbert or someone else who can play a 1B kind of role or be a backup kind of role, who has some talent. So I don't know that they'll ever fully hand the reins over to Brown like they did with Mixon, but I think this year is going to help us to determine that. But from what I've seen, I like out of Brown, and he's done some decent pass pro for Burrow, and I know that's huge for them. That's why we brought back Travion Williams, because Travion Williams is a phenomenal pass protector, but he has played a total of 0 snaps on offense so far this season because Moss and Brown have been doing a good job in pass pro. So I think it's going to be Brown. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not. I don't think he's a slam dunk by any stretch of the imagination, but my gut's telling me they're going to want to see more out of him. And from what I've seen out of him so far and watching him play, he seems like he can be a very serviceable. Like, I never thought Mixon was elite, but Mixon was a very good and very serviceable running back for us for a long time. I think Brown could fulfill a similar kind of role, even though I don't think the baseline talent is as high as Mixon was.
Okay. Good. So, oops. Brian wants to know Dodson or Bernard this week. Until we get confirmation if Bernard is back, I haven't heard anything. We have about 45 minutes until the official inactives come out for those early games. So
And I was trying to see. I know sometimes they'll leak something, so I was trying to see if anything had come up, and we don't have any news. If he's playing, I'd probably go Bernard because Dodson is also dinged up as well. Yeah, it's always tough playing a guy their first week back from injury, but teams these days, especially when it comes to like linebackers, they sort of tend to throw you back into the fire. It seems like I'd love to actually collect some data and see if that's my observational bias kicking in or if that's actually supported by data. But I've had a lot of times it feels like where I don't play someone because it's their first week back from injury, and then they get 100% snap share or 80% snap share, and it's like, okay, no, they're not going to ease them in. They're easing them in through practice now. And if they're not ready to play, they don't play, and they ease them in more so they can get back into their regular roles. So I like both of these guys. I think you're in a good spot long-term for rest of season. If Bernard plays, I'd probably lean Bernard. And if not, you got to go Dodson, assuming he plays.
Yep. No, I agree. Would you drop Landry and pick up Pratt? This is like one of those questions like we talked a little bit earlier about dropping defensive line talent for other positions, but I think this is probably close enough. I think Pratt's a borderline LB2, rest of the season. I think Landry is like a replaceable talent on the defensive line. And especially as we go through the bye weeks here too, that, those linebackers are going to be really valuable. And Pratt's been consistently healthy, consistent stat producer. I think he gets a great matchup this week with the Ravens. Like you said, they were going to run. How many times did you say they were going to run the ball?
I think 500 and something, I think is the over-under in my head.
I just didn't want to misquote you. So I just wanted to make sure I got my stats right. So yeah, I think Pratt makes a great option. And even in a league where you start one or two linebackers per team, I think Pratt's probably a weekly in the conversation there. So
yeah. And if this is like on Sleeper where Landry has that dual designation, I would never really be playing Landry in the linebacker spot over Pratt. There's probably lots of other defensive linemen. So I wouldn't necessarily think about, as much as you can, assuming this is Sleeper. And if it's not, it's a different kind of calculus. But I would think about Landry versus the rest of your defensive linemen rather than Landry versus the rest of your linebackers. And, I think Pratt is definitely a much better play in that LB sleeper kind of spot. And I think also just from a positional scarcity, I think linebackers have good positional scarcity across formats and across 3 position leagues or 5 position leagues. So it'd be really hard to drop Landry because I like him an awful lot. But hopefully that just means that you're in a really, really good spot with your roster that you can be affording to do this. But I would look at your roster composition and what the rest of your DL room looks like if you're on Sleeper, or your DE room looks like if you're playing on MFL or some of the other places that use the 5 position designations.
Yeah. And my DMs are always open. Like if you want to send a screenshot of your roster and we can look for a player, I'm more than happy to do that at any time. So appreciate that. Diego's got another one here. Julian Blackmon or Petrie this week. So Blackmon, like we said, gets a really tough matchup versus the Jags. Petrie gets an amazing matchup versus the Bills this week. I'm leaning Petrie pretty strongly in this one just because of matchup. I think this is going to be a shootout between the Bills and Texans. I think this is going to kind of go back and forth. A lot of plays on both sides. So
yeah, I just looked it up. The Bills are. Sorry, I'm confusing myself with the opponents and everything. But no, Petrie does have a great matchup, and I think I would definitely try to exploit that. As much as I like Blackmon, as much as Petrie obviously hasn't lived up to year 1 performance, but I mean, most people knew he wasn't going to live up to that year 1 performance, but he can still have some really good games, and this feels like one of those opportunities for him to have a really big game.
Yep. And not to go too deep into this, but if Aziz Al-Shair is like sick or not feeling 100%, this could definitely see a little more added value to Petrie there. So Welcome, Spartacus. Thank you. Is this a good week to play Overshown over Kendricks? This is really tough because Overshown is super efficient in his snaps. I know that Kendricks is playing nearly 100% of snaps and Overshown's not quite there yet. So am I taking the player in Kendricks who's playing 100% of snaps, or am I playing Overshown who's probably playing, 80 to 85% of snaps, but maybe getting a little more efficiency with those snaps? Is that 10 or 15 snaps a week more for Kendricks. For me, it is. I'm always going to play volume. So
Yeah,
I'm going to play Kendricks still.
I would play Kendricks over Overshown, but I think the question he raises is an interesting one about actually playing two linebackers from the same team. And I know it's a risk reward proposition, but Overshown's snaps have been increasing. He went from 31% in week 2 to 78 and 3 and 86 last week, which was his season high. So it seems like he has a very clear LB2 role. I know you said Liafu has been playing some. He played about 40% of snaps last week. Clark, as you said, is an afterthought. He's down to 7% of snaps. But I think that the matchup is strong enough where it could really feed two linebackers. Pittsburgh has been allowing 41.88 points per game to linebackers so far this season. That's definitely in the upper half of points allowed to linebackers. So I think that it's always risky, but hey, it's going to make watching Sunday Night Football a lot of fun because you're going to be locked in on every single Pittsburgh offensive play, hoping that Overshown and Kendricks get some assists together. So you can feed both of them at the same time. But I think Kendricks is a definite play, and I think Overshown, depending on who else you have, I wouldn't play someone worse than him over him just because he's on the same team as your main starter. So I think this would be a viable week where you could do that. And there's not a lot of teams and a lot of matchups where I do that very often, but this does seem like one of those situations, depending on what else is out there for you.
I got a lot of questions during the week over on Twitter about can I trust starting both Colts linebackers this week versus the Jags? And so it was, obviously Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed both having tremendous seasons, but in a really bad matchup versus Jacksonville this week. So looking at the people who are asking, looking at their options, we went with both Colts linebackers, but I think you're on here too about there are very few teams that you can probably trust playing both linebackers. And whether it was just through waiver wire acquisitions or just drafting a certain way, like sometimes you could run into that situation where you have two linebackers from a team. And for me, I try to go with a different route just to diversify my lineup a little bit. But there are certain situations, and this might be one of those where, maybe the Colts in the AFC and the Cowboys in the NFC are those teams that you can kind of get away with running both of those linebackers out there. So
yeah, and I'd love to start both Wilson and Pratt this week because I think there's going to be tons of opportunity for Bengals linebackers. I think they're both elite linebackers. Yep. So I wouldn't be too scared of that. But I am like you. I'm kicking myself, but I had an opportunity to acquire Trey Hendrickson 2 years ago for like a third, but I already had Hubbard on my roster. And I was like, man, I really don't want both of these edges. So I'm just going to pass. And then, of course, Hendrickson has panned out the way that Hendrickson has panned out. And he's been on someone else's team these past couple of years rather than mine. But if you already have them both, then I think they're fine to play. And I'll be honest, I'm playing both of them in one of my leagues. But granted, it's kind of a weird league where we set it up like if you used to play Madden back in the day, one of my favorite things to do in Madden was to like take over a franchise and see how you could do with it moving forward. Well, we took that concept except eliminated half of the teams from the league. So it was a 16-team league, but your starting roster was the roster of the NFL team at that time, and you got to supplement it. So I picked the Cowboys, and I have both these guys because I acquired Kendricks before he became a Cowboy. So I'm actually very happy to have both of them this week. And I think, again, it's not a way that you typically want to build your rosters in most leagues. But when the value is screaming there with someone trying to make a trade, get Trey Hendrickson. Don't avoid him because you have Hubbard, and feel comfortable in playing one or both of them depending on the matchup.
Yeah, and a way to kind of think about that is like, okay, I want to get 15 point or 30 points out of my linebacker position. If I start both of those guys, I'm probably going to get the 30 points. Doesn't matter if it's 24 from one and 6 from the other or 15 and 15. I'm still getting the 30 points from my linebacker position. It just might be, in a unique way to get it. So
yeah, and that's a great way to think of it. Pittsburgh is giving up 41.88 to linebackers. So, on average, you're going to get about 40 points from those two positions. You could pick one of them and, like you said, maybe pick the guy who has 6 and not the guy who has 34 or something like
Yep.
that. But you play them both, you're going to get the point. So I like that philosophy.
You're welcome there, Diego. Let's keep him going here. Tyler Newman, rest of the season outlook. I have him starting today in a great matchup versus Seattle. Newman has played 100% of snaps all season long. He hasn't missed a snap at all for the Giants defense. Pretty tackle consistent. You know, I know there was 1 week he had like 2 tackles or 3 tackles, but you know, he's had a 5 tackle week. He's had an 8 tackle week. I love him going forward. Rest of the season, I think he's a safe DB2. I would like to see a little more splash play from him, either it being as a sack or interceptions or forced fumbles or something like that. But he's got a really high tackle floor. And like you said, a really nice matchup today versus Seattle, who's going to throw the ball around the yard quite a bit. So,
yeah, I don't have Newman anywhere, but if I did, I would be very happy that I had him. But he's just someone who I didn't end up getting in drafts this year. But I think that he is a really viable play for the rest of the season, assuming nothing changes with his role or snaps or anything like that. And I don't see any indication that it's likely to.
No, I don't see a Dane Belton kind of overtaking him or anything like that. So T-Mac has a question. Who would you roster? Pick one. Paulson Adebo, Taron Johnson, Polamalu, Deshaun Elliott, or Brandon Jones? I think Brandon Jones is the lock here for me. Jones seems to be.
Yeah, and I agree. I think we've already established that Jones is my Quentin Lake. He's a guy that, you know, you're going to have a hard time talking me off of him in many questions. I know he's not the best safety in the league, but like we talked about before, I'll roster safeties over corners 90% of the time. He is one of those who I'm very happy to get. I'm not as concerned about Locke. You know, Locke has been a guy who I've played in some spot starts here and there over the years, but Locke and Jones both played 100% of snaps last week. So he's doesn't seem to be hurting Jones or his productivity or his playing time at all. So, you know, I would stick with Jones. And then if you were going beyond that, who would be your second best out of this option?
I'm going to gamble and take the upside of the Deshaun Elliott there. Just liking the safety spot, like you said. Anytime I can pick a safer position, I'm probably going to give a nod to the safety over the cornerback. Adebo's had an amazing season. You know, Taron Johnson's going to be great when he comes back and gets fully healthy. You know, you got the lottery ticket in Polamalu there, but Elliott just seems like a really solid spot there to capitalize. Kind of digging deeper on that question about the Locke and Jones alignment. They both played almost identical alignment. Jones has played 9 snaps on the defensive line. Locke is 6. Jones has 52 snaps in the box. Locke has 63. Both free safety spots. Jones is 141. Locke is 155. Slot 24 to 33. So they're almost like the same player being interchangeable. So I think it might just be more week to week than it would be like season long. And so it'll be interesting to see, like, kind of going forward another week without Singleton to see kind of how that really shakes out. So
yeah, and Elliott would be my number 2 as well there. Although Pittsburgh is weird. I was just looking at their snap shares. Elliott got 85%, which is, you know, solid, but you see a lot of safeties playing 100%. So I was wondering where those other snaps went. 17% went to DeMonte Kazee, who's been around the league forever. And I had no idea they have Terrell Edmonds back. So he played 12% of snaps for them. Like he wasn't good for them the first time around. They let him walk. He's played on 3 other teams, but apparently he's back with them. And, you know, it's only 8 snaps, but still vulturing some snaps from Elliott because Fitzpatrick is at 100%. He's not losing anything. So I like Elliott the second most of that group too, but he does have some concerns for me. Like, okay, why are the Steelers bringing in back this, you know, Edmonds, who they didn't like to begin with, and then giving him snaps his first week back on the team? So that's the only thing that gives me a little bit of pause in case anyone else, because I think Elliott's name has come up a couple of times this week. So I'd still play him, but I would watch the rotation to see rest of season if he is a pretty solid weekly play or if we might need to look elsewhere.
You're welcome, T-Mac. Best of luck to you. Yeah, so I had a question earlier about Khaleke Hudson being an option for, let's see. I know he was in a spot as a pickup player versus, oh, here we go. Nope, not that one. I know he was like one of the waiver wire options for, oh, here we go. Rogeru. Yeah, so Simpson over Peyton Wilson, Khaleke Hudson, or, yeah. So Hudson actually is on the Browns. But he didn't play any even with any snaps yet for them. I know that Hicks is out, but they've got Devin Bush is there, and so
Yep.
I don't think he's probably going to be an option. You know, one name that might be a little intriguing as a stash is Peyton Wilson. You know, I know that they might not be as excited or happy about the linebacker play that they're getting right now out of Queen, and his snaps have been kind of on the uptick for the last couple of weeks. So how, you know, he played 36% of snaps in week 2, 43% of snaps in week 3, played 56% of snaps in week 4. You know, we're kind of seeing this trend continue. So like Simpson or Wilson might be a stash just in the event. Like I know they can't like bench Queen, but clearly has not been the player that they were hoping that he would have been. So you know, I think that he's makes for an interesting, like, you know, stash at least through the bye weeks and see what happens if this trend continues and things like that. So I'm still going to stick with the original, keep Simpson in. But I think that Wilson might be a player to try to sneak on your lineup if you can. So, or in your,
and Hudson being with the Browns doesn't really do anything for me. I don't think, I know Hicks has been dinged up a lot this year, but I didn't get a sense that it's a significant injury, that he's going to be out for a prolonged period of time. Like you said, they have Devin Bush, who played 85% of snaps last week. I don't see, I'd be shocked if Hudson played a significant role this week or next week or really at any point, unless there's another injury. You know, if we're talking JOK gets hurt now too, or Bush gets hurt, then I think, you know, Hudson might be a sneaky play, but you know, that'd be at that point a pretty messy situation. And I don't know that I'd want to be really running out to get a piece of it.
And Devin or Hicks kind of had that mysterious injury during preseason. Like he was just like out for a couple weeks and no one really knew or no one said anything about the injury. And so, yeah, we'll just kind of see what happens there. I haven't heard anything officially what the injury was there. So, yes. Sean asked a question earlier about Crosby and Spillane, but his phone died. So we were saying that if you need a home run, go with Spillane. Or I'm sorry, if you need a home run, go with Crosby, especially if it's a sack heavy format. But Scott kind of alluded to the fact, like, hey, if you're doing really well this week, you just need some safe points. Maybe Spillane is your guy, especially with the injury designation to Crosby. He could go out there and play the whole game, or he could go out there and re-aggravate the injury, and you know then you're sick with a goose egg for the week. So, kind of play it based on how your week is going. So,
yeah.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, and if you're not following us over on the Twitter, make sure that you do. We're available all week. Lots of great content going out each and every day. So Cole has a question here. Picking two between Granderson, Keon White, and Will Anderson. TJ Watt and Roquan are my other two auto starts. So of those three, Scott, who you sitting between Granderson, Keon White, or Will Anderson?
Oh, this is another embarrassment of riches. I think I would sit, I don't think I would sit White. So for me, it's between Granderson and Anderson. I know Granderson has outperformed Anderson so far this year from a fantasy perspective, but instead of just thinking it through, I suppose I could actually look at all this data that I've grabbed. Let's see. So Will Anderson, I think I still have in that, you know, kind of DE2 kind of range. So I'm definitely playing him. Keon White, I know, is also really high in all the modeling I do. Let's see where he's at this week. I don't know. I'm not able to find him at the moment, but I think I would. For me, it's between Granderson and Anderson. I'm playing White and probably Anderson, but you could convince me otherwise.
Yeah, I think the nice thing here with this is you have such a high floor with Watt and Smith that you can afford to swing for the fences with that fourth piece here. I think White is a really solid piece week in and week out. Whereas if you already have Watt in, you already have Smith in, you know your floor and your ceiling with them, you can afford to swing for the fences with Anderson. So I'm gonna swing for the upside here with a big matchup versus the Bills. So
yeah, and I was finally able to get a hold of that part of the data, and I have White as a number one play this week, Granderson as a top 6 play, and Anderson as a top 15. So I guess I'm a little bit higher this week on Granderson than Anderson. So just to revise that a little bit, but White is definitely he is. Depending on whether you have him as a defensive lineman or a DT or an edge in your league, he's one of the top ones for me, regardless of your positional designations. So I guess I'm switching up a little bit now that I was actually able to find the rows of data and the 800 players that I have stuff here for. I'd probably go Granderson over Anderson this week. Definitely not long term, but that's where I'd go.
perfect. Yeah, and like you said, embarrassment of riches there. So nice job, Cole, with your drafting there. So another Anderson question here. So one DL this week between Anderson, Rousseau, Allen, or a Seattle defensive lineman. Thinking is that Kyle Allen for the
I would think it'd be maybe
Broncos?
Jonathan Allen.
Jonathan Allen? Oh, for the Commanders?
Yeah. They're
Okay.
playing the Browns this week. It's not necessarily a great matchup. His snaps were way down. I mean, he's I guess it could also be Zach Allen. There's a lot of Allens.
That's what not Cody Allen, Zach Allen. That's what I was thinking of Denver. That's what I was thinking of Denver's guy. The Seattle ones might be intriguing too against a very suspect Giants defensive line. You know that Daniel Jones loves to get sacked. So, is if Mafe is, I think he's going to be good to go this week. So that might be an interesting one. Seattle's been a really sack heavy team this season as a defense. Derek Hall might be an option there. So,
yeah, Derek Hall has been a mainstay in my streaming article. All it takes is a few more leagues to pick him up, and I won't be able to put him in the streaming article anymore. So I wrote him up again this week. I think he's as viable of an option as like a Jonathan Cooper, or even I have him in the same grouping as Brian Burns and Jonathan Grenard even this week. So I think it's either Hall, or if that's Zach Allen, then I think Zach Allen would be probably my next one. Jonathan Allen, I have him in a bunch of places, but I can't trust him right now. I'm not a big Rousseau guy, so I would probably say like Derek Hall would be my top choice of those options, and then followed by probably Zach Allen, and then Anderson, and then Rousseau, and the other Seahawks D lineman would probably be in that next kind of tier for me.
Okay. Good stuff. Roger wants to know, Newben is on my waiver. Do I pick him up, or keep Blackman in? I think this is the case of like, you already have Blackman. You're hoping Newben becomes Blackman. When Blackman's in, he's just, much higher tackle floor, offers those big splash plays, and that's what we're kind of hoping Newben becomes. So I think this is like a bird in hand is better than one in the bush. So I'm going to keep Blackman here over Newben.
Yeah, the only wrinkle is if we're talking dynasty, I might want to get in on Newben now, even though it might hurt me a little bit in the short term, because like you said, the ceiling there. But Newben has he's younger, he has the draft capital, he is playing the snaps. I like Blackman. Blackman's always one of those guys who I forget about, and then I start doing the best balls that we do, and it's like, oh yeah, Blackman's a pretty viable play. But he's also, I don't know his contract situation. A lot of these safeties can be really awesome, viable plays until just suddenly they're not. And it's happened to a lot of guys through the years. I don't see Newben disappearing anytime in the next 2 to 3 seasons. again, I don't know Blackman's contract situation, but assuming he's not on a big long-term deal, I think if it's dynasty, I would strongly consider it. If it's redraft, I'm with you 100%. Just keep Blackman, play him, but that's the only wrinkle for it for me. So I don't want to do all this in real time, but what I would honestly do is look up Blackman's contract, because that's always a nice signal for me in dynasty. I look up contracts a lot when I'm making trades and decisions like this. And unless he is like really legitimately locked in without potential outs in a year or 2 years, I would consider picking up Newbin for Blackman if you can stand to take a little bit of a hit this season.
Yep. And as you move further away from the ball, defensive linemen, linebackers, and defensive backs, I'm less concerned about in a dynasty league, even something like this. If Newbin's on your waiver wire in a dynasty league, then that kind of shows there's other talent probably on the waiver wires in your dynasty league too. So I'd keep riding Blackman here as long as you can. Love what you guys do. Hey, we love doing it for you guys. Looks like Bernard is expected to play. Yes, be sure to hit like, everyone. Thank you. Appreciate that. We appreciate those as well. Making sure you're following us over on X, over at the IDPshow.com, or following Professor IDP or myself. We are here for the you. Mm-hmm. Looking to make some roster moves, drop Christian Watson or Ladd McConkey. Whew. I guess the big question is, who are you hoping to add or roster by making this move? That's kind of like the cost version there. He says that both are on his bench every single week. So if you had to, as much as it pains me, I'm going to obviously I would try to see if someone in my league would give me anything for them. First of all, like just throw out any offer, like even if you're getting something for them rather than just outright dropping them. But I'm probably going to keep the upside of McConkey just because he's an unknown. Watson, that role in Green Bay, we kind of seen enough of it, although he's been kind of dinged up. I think Jaden Reed is probably the consistent wide receiver to own in Green Bay. And like you said, if they're on your bench every week, I'd take the upside and unknown in McConkey here over the kind of known with Watson.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think we've seen Watson is one of those guys that can have some great, like I like Watson in best ball because I also don't know who is going to be, like I think Jaden Reed is the one, but who else is going to eat? I mean, even at tight end, I was really high on Musgrave coming into the season, and now, it's Tyler Kroft. So yeah, I would probably lean towards the potential of McConkey over Watson, but I would think in a lot of leagues you should be able to hopefully get something back for him. And like I said, it would depend on what else is out there, because I think Watson is an injury or two away from being having a very clear role in a very solid offense. And McConkey, we're still seeing what he's going to be. So I'd be pretty hesitant to get rid of either of them.
Yeah. If I had to, though, like I said, if we have to do it, we have to do those things, but that's where I'm at. Will Nuchin also be active tonight? Can I still play Derek Hall? So this was right up your alley, Scott, talking about Derek Hall being in your streaming.
Yeah. So Nwosu is back. And we are going to have to see how that plays out with the rotation. Boye Mafe, last I saw, was still questionable. So there was still a little bit more up in the air about whether or not he was going to play. If they're both healthy, it definitely hurt Derek Hall. It hurts Derek Hall's stock considerably. But I would keep an eye on Mafe. If Mafe plays, then if you can pivot out of Hall, I would pivot out of Hall. There are some great interior defenders on the Seahawks that you might be able to grab off of your waiver wire. I know I wrote up Jaron Reed this week. Draymond Jones was like a sneaky play for me last week as well that I added as kind of like a bonus streamer. So if one or both of them are still out there and available, and Nwosu, who is going to play, but Mafe also plays, I would be very tempted to go more interior D-line for Seattle at that point. If you don't have options on other teams, assuming you might just have to do a really quick pivot, that's my thoughts there. I like Derek Hall, but I don't know that he is going to outsnap Nwosu and Mafe when they're both healthy.
Roguru needs to pick 2. Mad Max, Will Anderson, Montez Sweat. Again, the tricky part with this is the late start for the Raiders, not knowing with Crosby, because the other 2 are going to be playing in the early window of games today. I guess we should say the middle window of games today, because we already have a very early window for this morning. So,
oh yeah, we've been doing this so much, I completely forgot that game was taking place.
I think the Jets forgot that this game was taking place too.
Oh yeah, 17-7.
Yep.
Sorry, getting back to the question at hand. It's definitely Max and Anderson for me if they're all playing. I like Sweat. I'm holding Sweat in a lot of places. He started to show some flashes, but he's getting outsnapped by Walker, and that's never a good thing for fantasy viability. So if you want to be a little more risk averse because you're worried about the Crosby injury, I think Sweat's a fine play. Anderson is the one I'd definitely lock in of these 3, and then go Sweat if you are concerned and there's not much out there. But honestly, I have Sweat a little bit deeper in my rankings this week. He's a solid deeper play for me. So there's a lot of guys that might still be out there, like Benito and Owe, Sam Hubbard. Trying to look at some of the other names. I have Draymond Jones. I have above Sweat this week. So there might be some pivots. So I'm kind of talking myself into starting Crosby and Anderson. And then if Crosby is out, pick somebody up to put in for him, as long as you don't have to cut anybody significant to do it.
Yeah. And I know it's kind of hard to decide how your week is looking right now, but Sweat has a really great matchup versus the bottom tier pass blocking offensive line with Carolina. So I think if you're in a situation where you're feeling pretty safe, maybe you can roll out Will Anderson and Sweat and not worry too much about it. But it's kind of early to tell, especially if you're going to have to set those lineups here in about 12 minutes for sure. I think Scott nailed it with the start Max, and then if you need to, a lot of options in the later window of games. Green Bay has a great matchup versus the Rams this week. So if you have any of the Green Bay Packer rushers available on your waivers, if you have to pivot, maybe there's a Luke Van Ness out there for some reason, or maybe somebody got frustrated with Rashawn Gary. Those kind of players, it would be a great pivot for you.
Yep.
Bernard wants to know, playing Nick Herbig, Leonard Williams, assuming that's the Seattle one, Kobe Turner from the Rams, or Calais Campbell picking 2 from the Dolphins?
Yeah, so
Herbig's the one for me for sure.
Yep, I'm with you there. And then as much as I like Leonard Williams, this is his first game back from injury. Draymond Jones and Jaron Reed are still going to play, so we'll see what that rotation looks like. I'd probably go Kobe Turner, 83% of snaps last week, which is an elite rate. I love Calais Campbell. He's a lot of fun, especially in some of the best ball leagues, the managed best ball leagues I have, where I can activate and deactivate players and things like that. But I think for me, it's Herbig and Turner this week. You might be able to talk me into Williams, but again, I keep saying, hey, I don't play guys their first week back from injury, and then they have their regular role and have a huge week. So I think I'm probably accidentally sending some positive performance Williams' way, but to be safe, I would go Herbig and Turner.
Does the Jalen Phillips injury give Campbell any kind of bump, or just because they play 2 different positions?
No, it doesn't do much for me.
Okay.
I know a lot of people have been even talking about Ogba getting a big bump.
Yes, he was a big name in waivers this week.
But even Ogba, doesn't really play that same role. I mean, Agba even has DT eligibility in a lot of leagues just based on where he predominantly lines up. So but I do think he's more of a movable piece. And I know Campbell has spent some time at end, spent some time at defensive tackle, obviously. So I think that it will help to keep him on the field a little bit more, but I don't know that it's going to really do much to juice his production.
And then I think I saw a report that Chubb might be back, so that might be, definitely a need for that defensive line because they've been just decimated with injuries and underperformance all season long. So we'll get there. Kind of a follow-up here to Roguru's question, and this is perfect because Roguru was looking at picking two of these between Sweat, Anderson, and Max. So this makes his decision even easier. So we were saying go Anderson and Max and then pivot. He just happens to have Preston Smith and Brian Burns as an option later in the afternoon window. So yeah, that's a really solid defensive line room. And it makes his job really easy just to go Max there. And if Max is ruled out, then you can pivot to Burns or Smith. So of those two, who would you pivot to if Max is out there, Scott?
I would pivot to Smith. He's got a good matchup. LA is allowing 44.9 points to edges so far this season. So I think that he's going to have a lot of opportunity. And at this point, I trust him more even than, Rashawn Gary. I've got him several spots ahead of Gary in my rankings this week. So it would probably be Smith for me. Burns has all the talent in the world. And most weeks I would pick Burns over Smith, but this is not that week.
Yeah, that's a position to be in there with having that kind of options, especially like not having to go out and drop anyone. You can just plug and play. So Keith has a question here on defensive line, Latu or Calais Campbell. I think it's Latu pretty clearly for me. Just playing on the outside, he's going to get a ton of snaps. He's probably going to play more snaps than Campbell is. That Indy defensive line room has just been decimated all year with injuries between Ebicam, now Kwity Paye is out. DeForest Buckner is out. So Latu finds himself getting a copious amount. Even they lost Taquan Lewis last week too, right? That was another one that they lost.
Yeah. He was I had him written up as a streaming option, and then he ended up getting hurt. So
you jinxed him. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it, Scott.
Awesome. I didn't mean it. But yeah, I think I'm Latu here over Campbell as well. I've got Latu as a solid play. So he's just below kind of that ideal, in part because we want to see what the snaps look like. He was at 66% last week, which was good. Not great, not kind of where we want him to be. I agree that his snaps are likely to go up, but I want to see it before I put too much stock in it. But we also know what Campbell's snaps are likely going to be given his age and his performance. And he was at 55% last week. So Latu is likely to outsnap Campbell. Campbell has a phenomenal matchup against the Patriots. They're giving up just tons of points to interior defenders, but I think I would probably stay with you and lean Latu here, but it's maybe not as clear for me.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because the Colts only have two healthy defensive ends on their lineup right now in their roster. So it's gonna, if he's good to go, he's out there. So
yeah.
Good luck to you, Keith. Tyler has a question: Peyton Wilson or Cody Barton, or Trevin Wallace over both of them. So Peyton Wilson might be an answer to this question in 2 or 3 weeks, but Cody Barton is still the answer here in week 5. And even over Trevin Wallace, I think Barton playing 100% of snaps last week just kind of solidified like he's going to kind of be in that Alex Singleton role. He's not going to put up Alex Singleton type numbers, but he's going to be having that opportunity. So I think Barton pretty easily over Wilson and Trevin Wallace for me.
Yep, I agree. Barton, we know his role, we know his snaps. I think that both Wallace and Wilson could end up being good plays, but you go with what you know, and I would go with Barton.
All right. Fantasy sports. Which two linebackers should I start? Franklin, Dodson, Long Jr., or Barton? Well, Franklin for sure. And then we have two players kind of questionable with injuries. Long will know right away. We probably already should know within the next few minutes if Long is in or out versus a Patriots offense that might be a Jacoby Brissett, Antonio Gibson type week, which we all knew was going to happen here by week 5. And then Dodson playing late tonight or later window, possibly dinged up. Or do you go with the safe play of Barton? I think if Long is in, I'm going to go Franklin and Long.
Yeah, I'm a big David Long guy, but if he's out, it'd be Barton would be the next best pick for me. Yep. But I mean, Franklin is the lock. As much as I like Dodson, and I think he's got great upside, I don't know. I think that I like Long better, and then I think Barton is safer. So that's kind of how they shake out for me.
Yep, totally agree. Follow-up question, needs a defensive back here, Hamilton or Blackman? I'm going Hamilton. I think the matchup is great. He's been playing much better in last few weeks. I know he had a stinker in week 1 or week 2, which kind of left a sour taste in many managers' mouth, but I think he's been very good the last couple of weeks, and he gets a great matchup versus the Bengals, who are probably going to be a little pass happy this week. So,
yeah, yep, I'm Hamilton as well. Both good options, but I've got Hamilton. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, just 4 spots ahead of Blackman. So very much in the same tier, and just in my grading system, one's a 4.38, the other's a 4.5. So it's really tight for me, but Hamilton comes out ahead.
We'll have to do a show after the season, and we'll kind of look at that grading. It'll be kind of interesting to see all that breakdown. So we'll put that on the docket. So
yeah.
Jay Holly wants to know, Ford, B-Rob, McLaurin need floor. I think the answer for floor or ceiling is the same player here. I think it's Brian Robinson pretty easily for me.
Yeah, I like Robinson the most out of that group too. The floor thing though has me thinking a little bit. I was trying to, because I don't have all the offensive stats in front of me. I got all the defensive guys. But I think I know the Browns have been just a mess in general this year, but it seems like Ford is still pretty clearly in that lead role. I think Eckler might be back this week. I know Jeremy McNichols vultured some from B-Rob last week as well. So that gives me a little bit of pause to make it not as much of a slam dunk. I think I probably agree with you, but let's just real quick in real time look up some snap shares. Jerome Ford, these are 2023 snap shares, so that's not helpful. This year, still 79% week 3, 78% week 4. Deonta Foreman, 22% as the other option there. But when we look at the Commanders, Robinson only played 63% of snaps last week with Eckler out. And it was Jeremy McNichols who became the waiver wire darling. So I think I would probably lean Ford a little bit over Brian Robinson, but as a floor play, I'm almost always going to take running back over wide receiver, just because you never know what's going to happen with wide receivers and who's going to be the hot hand and who's not. And McLaurin also only played 71% of snaps last week, which is the lowest he's recorded in a long time. So I'm not sure exactly what the deal is there, but that's something to pay attention to.
I just wonder, like game scripting too, like you said, that kind of plays a huge role in that too. So best of luck to you in week 5, Howley. Got a couple questions here from Lou32. Good morning, gents. Start one defensive lineman, Zach Allen or Jared Verse?
So
I think upside for me is Verse.
Yeah, I think from an upside perspective, I'd agree. But I think just from a talent perspective, I've got Zach Allen as my third best interior option this week. So I think Zach Allen is a really strong play. Verse is a little bit lower. Let me just look at their raw scores that I have. So I've got Allen as a 4.38, Verse as a 3.75. So I'm definitely Allen over Verse here, but I can see if you're looking for an upside play, Verse definitely has more upside potential because Allen doesn't tend to get the sacks, but he gets tackles and he's there at the right time and he gets the occasional sack. Verse has more upside, but I think Allen is the safer play this week.
Perfect. We'll stick with Lou 32's questions here. He's got a safety question. Lake or Hamilton? As much as I love Lake, I can't start him over Hamilton.
Yeah, I agree with you. Hamilton has a better matchup. They're both great options, but I would go Hamilton.
Last one here from Lou 32. Minka Fitzpatrick or Cameron Curl at defensive back. Interestingly enough, both of these players are kind of playing like the same role. They're playing that deep center field role for them. I think I'm going to lean Minka this week versus the Cowboys, just having a great matchup. I think that's going to provide an opportunity for him more so, I guess, than Curl versus Green Bay.
Yeah, I mean, they're both playing 100% of snaps. This is another one where it's two good options. I've got Minka 4 spots ahead of Curl this week, so I see them as pretty comparable players. Curl's been a little bit of disappointment for me with kind of what I was expecting coming into the season versus the role that Quentin Lake has largely played. I really had some hope that would go to Curl given how versatile he was with Washington. But for this week, it's Minka for me by a small margin.
Okay. Jay Holly was agreeing. Yes, he's leaning forward to with that injury, all of that stuff. So I got an offensive question here. Jackson Smith and Najigba or Sermon this week. I am a huge truther in JSN. I know Sherman's got an opportunity this week to step up versus Jacksonville, who's depleted at linebacker with no Jonathan Taylor this week. Flacco's under center, so we don't have to worry about Richardson's vulturing goal line snaps from him. With that said, I love JSN this week versus a Giants secondary. I think it's his week this week. We saw a Metcalf week last week, so I'm going Jason this week.
Yeah, I agree. We don't know what we're going to get from Sermon. Sermon could be in one of those situations where I can't remember off the top of my head who the third option is there, but he could easily end up being in a timeshare with the third option and they ride the hot hand. And suddenly we look at the box score and Sermon had, 9 carries for 24 yards and maybe it's Goodson or I don't have the Colts depth chart memorized, but the other guy ends up being the hot hand that they ride. JSN, we know his role. We know that offense can click, and we know his potential. So I'm JSN as well.
Perfect. All right. Got a couple questions here from Bryson. One defensive lineman question: Mafe or Armstrong this week?
I'm Armstrong. I think that Mafe has a chance of playing. Everything I'm seeing is could return Sunday. So it's all very much up in the air with Mafe. But even if he plays, Armstrong has been getting the snaps. He's starting to get the production. He has a phenomenal matchup this week against the Browns. I've been throwing out a lot of numbers, and a lot of them, if they're in the 20s, it's not really so great. 30s are like so. The Browns have been allowing an average of 58.25 points to opposing defensive ends so far this season. So give me Armstrong and let's just have Deshaun Watson do Deshaun Watson stuff that allows for a lot of points for edge rushers.
Yeah, since we don't get to see Tennessee and we don't get to see who's the quarterback that eats mayonnaise? Will Levis. We don't get a Will Levis meme this week, so maybe Deshaun Watson can help us out. Another one here from Bryson has the question: pick 3 in a PPR: Shaheed, Chase Brown, Odunze, or Wicks. So of those 4, who are you benching this week? Mine's pretty easy for me, I think.
Probably benching Odunze.
Yep. Perfect.
Okay.
Yep. Just so tough to predict that offense is going to look like. There's so many weapons, so many mouths to feed. Keenan Allen's back now; he's playing. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Odunze for me. Just want to make sure I didn't miss any questions here. All right. Jesse asked, in my linebacker, I have Jeremy Chin in. Would you start DeMarcus Walker or Emmanuel Agba?
Ooh, yeah. This is a tough one for me because I think I've written up Walker every single week this year, and I think he is criminally under rostered. He's playing the 80% of snap shares. Ogba is a guy who I had written up last week. I'm high on again this week. Uh, I don't usually think of comparing them to a linebacker safety hybrid in Jeremy Chin. But I've got Walker and Ogba grouped right next to each other in sort of that very top end of that solid tier. And then just let me see where I have Chin. Chin I have as a little bit of a deeper play. So even though he's playing that 100% snap share, even though he's playing the Browns, oh, I think I would probably lean Walker here among these three options, but this is a tight one for me.
Yeah, it's always interesting too when you get the like cross positional starts. It's always tough to compare apples and oranges, especially when you're looking like that. So best of luck, Jesse. Got a couple questions here left. We'll see if we can wrap it up here sooner than later. Sorry if this is late, guys, but do I start a third defensive line with Verse or a third linebacker with McDuffie? So again, just kind of spot on here about the different positions. So as a flex position, again, depending on scoring, if it's a sack heavy league, which rewards really well for that, I'm firing up Verse here, probably a little higher floor, or sorry, a little higher ceiling with that type of scoring. Tackle heavy, I'm going to probably lean towards McDuffie.
See, this is one for me where in either format, I'm probably going Verse. Verse is ascending, and McDuffie has some question marks. And we never know when the week is going to be that Edgerrin Cooper might overtake him, whereas we know Verse's role. So normally, if it was an every down linebacker and we knew they were going to get the snaps, I'm with you. It's that kind of calculus of are you looking floor or upside? But I see McDuffie as having the potential to have a pretty low floor if this is the game where his snaps finally fall off of a cliff. So I'd probably lean Verse regardless of scoring format in this particular situation.
Perfect. Spartacus wants to know, would you rather give a high ceiling to B-Rob versus Cleveland or Gibson in New England? Thanks for the input.
Oh, man, that Commanders offense has just been humming. But again, I can't. I've got Jeremy McNichols itis after last week, where it just makes me a little bit nervous. Gibson is taking on a bigger role according to all reports. Yep. So I think Gibson might be the higher upside play here, but this could also be the week that B-Rob doesn't get any touchdowns vultured and has a 3 touchdown performance and is RB1 for the week. I think the
both defenses play,
I think the safer play is B-Rob, and I think that should be a blowout, which should mean they're running the ball an awful lot versus Gibson. Game script could end up biting him. I don't know. I feel like I'm talking to myself. The more I talk, the more I think I'm convincing myself that it maybe is B-Rob here if we're talking about a ceiling play.
And I'm going to go opposite. I'm going to go Gibson with the ceiling play because I don't think he comes off the field for either. If Coach Speak is true, he's going to get all the run and all the receiving opportunity. Whereas I could see Robinson losing touches to McNichols, or if Eckler's back, he's going to lose probably receiving downs to him. So I'm upside Gibson here just because of if Coach Speak is true, and we know every time they say things, it's always 100% accurate. But I'm gonna go Gibson here. I'm starting him in a couple of leagues where I got Barkley on the bench, so on his bye. So BJ, I love that emoji. That's a good one. I'm starting forward and flex. Do I start Amari Cooper as wide receiver 2 or rather Tyreek Hill? So we are at a point in our lives where Tyreek Hill is a wide receiver 2, and he's not even like an auto start anymore.
Yeah, he is for me. It could be me just holding on to the past for dear life, but he's that kind of player where
One
even
play,
with a
just
bad
one play.
quarterback, he can do something. So I'm definitely Hill here.
Same.
And a lot of
Pink
offense
Panther
to
love.
end the
Yeah.
show.
Yep. Cooper, Deontay, or Pittman this week. Pick two. I think Pittman with Flacco is a much safer play than he is with Richardson in. So Pittman's going to be there for me. He saw a pretty decent volume share last week when Flacco was in. Then it comes down to Cooper, Deontay for me.
I think Cooper, because I could see the Browns falling behind and just having to pass it, and assuming Deshaun can complete at least a couple of those, Cooper should be in a position to score. So I like Deontay. I know this is the second or third time I've been like, I wouldn't play Deontay. I'd be very happy if I had Deontay. I would play him over a lot of guys, but and I think for me, the Deontay Pittman isn't too far apart because it's both backup quarterbacks that might be better situated, not might be, but likely are better fantasy situations for each of them. Neither offense gets me very excited. One has just questionable running backs with Hubbard and Sanders. The other is down their lead running back, so I don't really know what either of these offenses are going to look too much like. So it's Cooper and then probably Pittman for me.
I think the touchdown floor is more guaranteed with Pittman and Cooper than it is for Deontay for me. But underrated world, just Jeremy Jin just dropped a 3.5 tackles assist. Am I missing something, or are they messing up here? Usually they don't miss on anything. So there's a great show called IDP Prop Bets. If you're interested in that, that'd be a great show. You can check out that every week.
Yeah,
Johnny the Greek kind of heads that up. Yeah,
and I'm not the best for for D-line stuff. I can make some pretty educated guesses about how things are going to go. But when I look at every other position, I'm like, oh, Chin's playing 100% of snaps. Of course he's going to have more than 3.5 combined. And it's like, okay, but they do know what they're doing. And so I could very likely be missing something. So if it's anything other than D-line, I definitely go to IDP bets for all of my ideas. And even with D-line stuff, I won't ever just bet on my hunch. I'll always see what the guys have to say on that with Johnny and whoever his guest is for the week.
Are you signed up to be a guest yet this season?
I don't think so. I was just thinking, I've done this. I've done the main show with the guys. I've done IDP drafts. All I'm missing is the after show and bets, and I will have, completed the cycle.
All right, Jason, Johnny, you heard that here. Let's get it going here. Let's make it happen. Andrew, how are we feeling about Dorrance Armstrong at defensive end? I think you just mentioned him, how solid of a play he is. Yeah. Fire, wheels up. Yep. And Lou 32, tackle heavy league, Dorian Williams or Jerome Baker. It's got to be Dorian Williams here just because Baker hasn't played in a couple weeks, not really knowing what his status is for the game right now. Again, they play that later window of games. Tyrese Knight has come in and played really well for him. It's not like if he does play, he might not be 100% of snaps. So I'm going to lean Dorian Williams. Even with Bernard back in, I think he still gets a little higher floor here.
See, the Bernard being back thing swings it the other direction for me. I don't know. I think Bale Inspector is in some ways outplayed Williams. And so I don't know. I could see Williams getting 100% of snaps alongside Bernard. I could see him getting 5% of snaps. With Baker, if all the reports are right that he's past the hamstring issue and that he's good to go and he's going to play, he's a little bit of a safer play for me. But ideally, you'd have some other options out there. But if these are the two, I think Baker is the direction I would lean.
Yep. And like you said, the reports are he's had limited practice the last few days. So Joan Baker makes sense too, if that's what you're feeling. Expectations for Trent McDuffie seems like a spicy matchup. I think if you're rostering Trent McDuffie, this is the week you play him, because I think it's going to be a pass heavy game on Monday night. This is why, and Trent McDuffie last year was outstanding playing in that slot corner position, but this year he's playing on the outside after the L'Jarius Sneed trade. Mm-hmm. So if you've been rostering, this is the week probably to play him. I'm expecting maybe 4 or 5 tackles, maybe a pass breakup or two. So,
yeah, and I know we talked about this last week. It's not perfectly rational, but there's just something I really enjoy about playing guys on Monday Night Football. because if you're down, you always have a chance. And this isn't a dart throw kind of guy. This is a solid player. I just looked up the CB streaming article from Johnny this week, and he has him listed as solid. So he's in a good spot. So I think I agree with you. I agree with Johnny. And like I said, I like having Monday Night Football guys going. So all of that would push me in McDuffie's direction.
Yeah, we only get one Monday Night Football game this week. What's up with that? So, well, Scott, that's going to do it for our questions here. So we'll kind of put a ribbon on the week. What are you working on? Where can the good folks find more of your work? And what else is going on?
Yeah. So you can find me on Twitter at Professor IDP. Every week I put out a DL streaming article where I highlight 12 players who could be good options for you if you're needing to stream defensive line. Been doing pretty well recently the last 2 weeks. And these are all players. There's like two tiers. There's available in 75% plus of leagues and 90% plus of leagues. So these are some guys that in my 16 team leagues are available. And each of the last 2 weeks, the picks have averaged over 10 fantasy points. So very, very happy with how that's shaking out so far. I'm pretty sure I just put the kibosh on myself for this week, but still there's sound metrics behind them. I give a write-up for why I pick each and every player, so you can use your own personal taste preference for who you like and whose logic stands up a little bit better. So that comes out every Wednesday. Still working on the state of IDP survey. I think we're up over 200 leagues now, so that's good, and that number is only going to continue to grow. And just tagging in whenever the guys need me, and tagging out when they unexpectedly don't. I was going to be on with Adam and Bobby this week, but due to some work issues, they had to record a day earlier, so I'm not going to be on with them. But I'm sure I'm going to be down in the BG sometime here this season. So just happy to be talking with you and talking with the guys and just doing all the IDP stuff.
Well, we appreciate all your work. And if you're not checking out Scott's work, do yourself a favor and head over there. Head over to the IDPshow.com website. Regardless, there's literally something every day, whether it's cornerbacks, linebackers, defensive linemen, waiver wires, the trade stuff. It's all there. So everything you need, be sure to check it out. I'm going to give a little shout out to my 19-year-old today. Braden celebrating his birthday down in Madison. I'm sure he's in the library right now studying very hard. So love you, buddy. Have a great day, and we'll catch you folks next week. Thanks again.